Perversion is not only the instrument with which a corrupted elite controls society, it's also the binding agent that holds them together. Jeffrey Epstein's origins are a bit of a mystery. He was apparently set up to have a lucrative career he was not qualified for.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Famously, Lex Wexner, CEO of L Brands, parent company to Victoria's Secret and others, essentially signed over his vast wealth to be managed by Epstein by giving him power of attorney. He was also Epstein and Company's main or only client. And prior to that, Alan Greenberg set Epstein up at Bear Stearns. But his first real job was given him by the headmaster of the prestigious Dalton School in New York, where he taught mathematics, despite not having a college degree. He was hired at the age of 21 in 74 and fired soon after in 76 for poor performance, according to Peter Branch, the interim headmaster at the time. But the previous headmaster, the one who hired Epstein, Donald Barr, is interesting to look at. He's the father of William Barr, who went on to become U.S. Attorney General, and it was under William Barr's watch that Epstein took his own life. But coincidences aside, apart from being headmaster, Donald Barr was a science fiction writer whose 1973 novel Space Relations, subtitle A Slightly Gothic Interplanetary Tale, describes a future ruled over by interstellar transhumanist elites. The main character, John Craig, spends time as a slave to a sadistic aristocratic woman, engaging in relations with her and others, including an enslaved teenager at a clinic used to breed slaves. Apparently, the protagonist participates without a great deal of moral qualms in these sorts of acts, so it's interesting that a man who had to interact with young people regularly as the headmaster of a school was writing this kind of stuff. And it's even more interesting that he's basically describing a fictionalized version of the sort of world that Epstein came to be such a prominent part of. But again, coincidences aside, the prominence of this sort of thing has become impossible to avoid, from the scandals out of European countries involving parliamentarians to the Epstein case, Puff Daddy apparently running a similar blackmail operation. We've got cases like the scandal around Abercrombie and Finch, although that hasn't been linked to a blackmail ring, but I'd be surprised if it weren't connected. It does make sense that you would want to compromise the people you rely on to keep the power structure going, and so would want blackmail material on them. It isn't so much that power corrupts as that power is incentivized to promote the already corrupt or the willingly corrupted to high positions. Especially in the age of audio-visual recordings, this becomes very useful. And it may be that in the age of AI deepfakes, this kind of thing loses some of its salience. There's also the issue of contradictory tendencies. It seems to be that a degenerate elite tends to promote degeneracy in the culture at large, but as taboos are broken down, the kind of thing you can blackmail people with has to become more extreme. You can no longer compromise someone by proving that they've cheated on their wife or outing them. Still, we can look at civilizations long before blackmail material could be recorded and find the same tendencies there. From Roman emperors to Ottoman sultans, there have always been periods of decadence, and this is a feature of degeneration. It's also a show of loyalty. No doubt people willingly allow themselves to be compromised in order to be part of the club. On this channel, we look at the symbolic resonance, the spiritual meaning of certain phenomena. And in this case, we can look at the question of what eros is, what erotic attraction is supposed to be. Tradition holds that it's about correspondence, and that attraction is the vehicle through which we reproduce. It's a conspicuous, stubborn fact of the human species that our reproduction is not centralized. It's not a queen at the center of a hive that reproduces the colony. It's families all over the place. And our reproduction isn't even centralized in time. We can reproduce during any season of the year. We're fundamentally a decentralized species. On a very deep and perhaps unconscious level, pathological power must resent this fact. Of course, now more than ever, such an elite could imagine centralizing reproduction with modern technology and rendering our species insect-like, like a hive, but that's science fiction. And if the underlying philosophy of that corrupted elite is that there is no inherent harmony to reality, that reality does not stem from a transcendent source, that it has no logos, no Tao, so to speak, the function of erotic energy to connect things that already correspond to each other ceases to make any sense. There is no inherent coincidence of opposites, no correspondence. The only order is the one we impose on an otherwise chaotic world, because there is no underlying source of order, no logos. Again, power is experienced as the ability not to cultivate, not to shepherd forth, not to guide the natural character of people and things into maturity, but to mold them into any arbitrary shape we desire. I've talked about this in another video. For such a mentality, eros, and every other instinct, but eros in particular because it's so central to the human species, to any species, the most fundamental function of self-reproduction, must become an instrument of imposition. Virtue is not about inner cultivation of vision of the good, but about arbitrary domination over mere clay, over a world and society thought to be devoid of meaning in themselves. Such a society is structured in terms of the lust for domination, the libido dominandi. Sexuality becomes the binding agent of a corrupted elite. It does not form closed units, you and your significant other, through which potentially the human species reproduces, and which in any case, reproducing or not, represents a bond between corresponding opposites, a kind of microcosm for the harmony of reality, the unity of duality. Instead, it forms a sprawling web of abuse and abuser in which people are integrated, a human centipede hierarchy of perversion. As ever, tyranny seeks to break down distinct forms, closed relationships, family, privacy, in favor of open society, entropy, diffusion, the swamp, so to speak.
We are going to drain the swamp.
Surveillance, where no one has walls behind which to protect himself. And this is what Trump is covering for.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein.
That island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives.
But it is interesting that Trump doesn't care about his legacy here. He must know that this response won't go down well with his own base. MAGA turned the Epstein file release into a major part of its hopes for the administration. And here he's bullying people into pretending there's nothing there.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
For Trump to be willing to throw his legacy away tells you something. Of course, the idea that Epstein was intelligence is by no means absurd, whatever the U.S. administration may now want to claim. Alexander Acosta, the former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, reportedly said that he was told Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone when he negotiated Epstein's lenient 2007 plea deal. Ari Ben Menashe, an Israeli businessman and apparently former intelligence, has also claimed Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were assets. Law enforcement apparently found CDs in Epstein's safe labeled Young Name plus Name at Epstein's Upper East Side mansion. That's not consistent with the idea that he was abusing and trafficking people just for his own entertainment. But suffice it to say that Trump's willingness to go along with that narrative, at least apparently, tells us that keeping the population on his side, catering to the people, appealing to the base, is increasingly less important than signaling towards the powerful that they will be protected.
Drain the swamp.
I think that less so.
He's done the same thing in other areas, but this is a big one. And when the political class signals towards its own, towards its shareholders, so to speak, even at the risk of mass popular dissatisfaction, it marks an inflection point.
You need us to help protect the land and water?
I think that less so.
They're barely pretending to represent you anymore. They think they don't need to. The question is, are they right?
As a matter of fact, kids, I'm swamped.
As always, there's links in the description for ways to help the channel. Please subscribe, join my Substack, become a paid member. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also become a YouTube channel member, drop me a super thanks, buy me a coffee if you would like to, and until next time.